All right, welcome to Section B, Theoretical and Philosophical Debates for your astrological term essay questions. There will be 3 questions to choose from. First question is: the planets do not cause events, they configure with them. Quote by Dane Rudar. Discuss the philosophical and practical consequences of this shift from a deterministic to a symbolic psychological model of astrology. How satisfactory is this model in addressing the charges of fatalism and superstition? Okay, let's answer number 1. From causation to configuration, Ruder's symbolic revolution and its discontents. The statement by Dane Ruder, the planets do not cause events, they configure with them, stands as a foundational axiom for much of modern astrological thought. It represents a deliberate and profound philosophical pivot away from the deterministic pre-Newtonian worldview and towards a symbolic, psychological, and ultimately postmodern paradigm. This shift, while offering a powerful rebuttal to the classic charges of fatalism and superstition, is not without its own philosophical complexities and practical shortcomings. While it successfully rescues astrology from the crude materialism of its detractors, it risks rendering the art so subjective and hermeneutic that it slips the moorings of empirical accountability altogether. The traditional deterministic model of astrology, which held sway from Ptolemy to William Lilly, operated on a principle of efficient causation. In this framework, the planets were understood as active agents emitting physical or metaphysical forces, be they humoral, radiative, or spiritual, that directly cause events and conditions on Earth and in human lives. Saturn, for instance, caused delay, restriction, and hardship. Mars caused conflict and fever. This model provided a powerful tool for prediction, but it left astrology vulnerable to 2 devastating critiques. First, the charge of fatalism. If the stars compel, then human free will is an illusion, and morality becomes meaningless. Second, the scientific charge of superstition. No plausible physical mechanism for such specific, long-distance influences could be found, and its predictions often failed under systematic scrutiny. The Enlightenment, as we have discussed, dismantled this model not by disproving it, but by changing the very definition of what constituted a valid cause. Ruder's genius was to sidestep this entire debate by reframing the astrological premise, drawing on Jungian psychology and the emerging philosophy of holism. He proposed a model of a causal synchronicity, or configuration. The planets do not cause life events any more than the hands on a clock cause it to be tea time. Instead, the celestial pattern and the terrestrial event are 2 parallel expressions of the same underlying moment in time, 2 facets of a unified reality. The horoscope is a symbolic map of the psyche and the potential qualities inherent in a given moment. A Saturn transit does not cause a job loss. It configures with a period in life where the themes of structure, responsibility, limitation, and consolidation become paramount. The external event, job loss, and the internal experience, anxiety, discipline, are both manifestations of the Saturnine archetype as it is activated in the individual's life. The philosophical consequences of this shift are radical. Firstly, it restores human agency to the center of the astrological drama. The individual is no longer a passive puppet of planetary forces, but an active participant in a symbolic dialogue with the cosmos. The astrologer's role transforms from a predictor of fate to a counselor who helps interpret the archetypal energies at play, suggesting how they might be best integrated or navigated. Secondly, it reclassifies astrology from a proto-science, a failed one in the eyes of its detractors, to a symbolic language akin to music or dream analysis. Its validity is not judged by the mechanistic accuracy of its predictions, but by the depth and coherence of its interpretations and its capacity to foster self-awareness. This move effectively humanizes the core of astrological practice against the charge of superstition, as it no longer makes claims about physical causation that can be easily dismissed by physics. On a practical level, this model has been immensely liberating for both astrologers and clients. It has fostered the growth of a humanistic therapeutic astrology focused on personal growth and psychological insight. It allows for a more nuanced and less frightening interpretation of so-called malefic planets, framing them as necessary catalysts for growth rather than as simple bearers of bad news. This has undoubtedly made astrology more palatable and relevant to a modern audience seeking meaning rather than prophecy. However, the critical question remains, is this symbolic model entirely satisfactory? While it is a brilliant strategic retreat from untenable positions, it raises new and serious problems of its own. The first is the problem of verification. If astrology does not make specific testable predictions, on what grounds can its validity be assessed? The symbolic model can risk becoming a self-sealing system, a hermeneutic circle, where any event can be post-rationalized to fit the archetypal theme. A Saturn transit that coincides with a promotion can be interpreted as taking on more responsibility, while the same transit coinciding with a sacking can be interpreted as imposed limitation. This intellectual flexibility, while rich interpretively, can appear to critics as a convenient excuse for predictive failure. The charge of superstition may be avoided, but it can be replaced by a charge of unfalsifiable vagueness. Furthermore, the model struggles to account for the undeniable correlation between certain astrological configurations and concrete external events of a collective nature. Can we truly say that the Pluto and Libra generation's relationship to marriage is only a psychological configuration and not also a reflection of profound sociological shifts? Does the symbolic model fully explain the timing of earthquakes or political upheavals in mundane astrology, or does it implicitly rely on a lingering notion of cosmic causation that it publicly disavows? By focusing almost exclusively on the individual's internal response, the model can neglect the compelling evidence that the cosmos also configures with events that are irreducibly external and physical. In conclusion, Reuter's shift from a deterministic to a symbolic model is arguably the most significant development in 20th century astrology. It is a highly satisfactory response to the charges of fatalism and superstition insofar as it redefines the terms of the debate, moving astrology out of the realm of mechanistic science and into the realm of meaning and psyche. It has democratized the practice and provided a profound tool for modern self-exploration. Yet its satisfaction is incomplete. In its zeal to escape the clutches of a discredited causality, it has perhaps swung too far towards a subjectivism that threatens to sever astrology from any tangible connection to the external, event-based world. The ultimate challenge for a mature astrology may be to forge a middle path, to develop a philosophy that can coherently integrate the causal, symbolic depth of Reuter's vision with a renewed capacity for rigorous, verifiable correlation with the concrete patterns of human and earthly experience. We must find a way to honor the configuration without entirely abandoning the connection. Moving on to question number 2. The Michel-Gauquelin statistical correlations for planetary heredity and profession, the Mars effect, have been hailed by some as a scientific vindication of astrology and dismissed by others as an irrelevant anomaly. Analyze the core findings and the ensuing debate. What are the implications, if any, for astrological theory and practice? The Gauquelin Enigma, a statistical ghost in the astrological machine. The 3-decade-long research program of Michel and Françoise Gauquelin stands as a unique and deeply perplexing episode in the modern history of astrology. Unlike the anecdotal evidence of practitioners or the philosophical speculations of theorists, the Gauquelins presented a formidable body of statistical data that appeared to demonstrate a non-random correlation between planetary positions at birth and subsequent professional eminence. The so-called Mars effect for athletes and similar correlations for other professions ignited a firestorm of debate. To some, it was the long-awaited scientific vindication. To others, a red herring of no relevance to real astrology. A clear-eyed analysis suggests that the truth is far more complex and intellectually challenging. The Gauquelin findings present a robust anomaly that mainstream science cannot adequately explain, yet their implications for astrological theory and practice are far from straightforward. The core of the Gauquelin's work was a monumental feat of data collection and statistical analysis. They gathered the birth times of tens of thousands of distinguished professionals from several European countries. Their key finding was that the planets Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon appeared more frequently in certain key sectors of the sky, just after rise, immediately following the ascendant, and just after culmination, immediately following the midheaven, for individuals in corresponding professions. Specifically, eminent athletes showed a statistically significant overrepresentation overrepresentation of Mars in these sectors. Prominent scientists and doctors show the same for Saturn, soldiers for Jupiter, and writers for the Moon. Furthermore, they found a weaker but still significant heredity effect, wherein the planetary patterns of parents were more likely to be replicated in the charts of their children than chance would allow. The Mars effect for sports champions became the most famous and heavily contested of these correlations. It was this finding that the Kwakellen submitted to the scrutiny of the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, or CSICOP, in the late 1970s. What followed was a scandal that ultimately bolstered the Kwakellens' credibility. The CSICOP committee, led by Dennis Rollins, publicly alleged that the Kwakellens had massaged their data, but Rollins later broke ranks, publishing a detailed account which asserted that it was the CSICOP members themselves who had engaged in statistical manipulation and misrepresentation in a desperate attempt to make the effect disappear. This episode transformed the debate. It was no longer merely a case of astrologers versus scientists. It was now a case of a stubborn, replicable statistical anomaly that resisted easy dismissal and exposed bad faith on the part of some of its most vocal critics. The implications of this for astrology seem, at first glance, profoundly vindicating. For the first time, a core astrological premise that planetary positions at birth are meaningfully connected to the life and character of the individual seemed to have a rigorous statistical basis. It offered a powerful rebuttal to the charge that astrology is entirely a product of fantasy and confirmation bias. It suggested that there is a something there, a measurable signal amidst the noise of subjective interpretation. However, to hail it as a full vindication of astrology is a profound overstatement, and here we encounter the reasons for dismissal. From the perspective of traditional or modern psychological astrology, the Kwakellen findings are strangely alien. Their model is starkly minimalist. It ignores the entire zodiac. The signs are irrelevant. It ignores aspects, houses in the traditional sense, and the Sun and Venus, which are central to most contemporary practice. Their key sectors are not standard astrological cusps, but zones of space derived from their own empirical observations. This is not the rich symbolic language of astrology as it has been practiced for millennia. It is a bare-bones behavioral correlation. For many astrologers, this is indeed an irrelevant anomaly, a curious statistical blip that has little to do with the art of synthesizing a complete natal chart to understand the complexities of an individual's psyche and life path. It reduces the poetic symbolism of Mars, the god of war and desire, to a crude marker for athletic profession. The true implication of the Kwakellen work, therefore, may not be a vindication of astrological theory, but a fundamental challenge to it. It poses a deeply awkward question. If the zodiacal signs and aspects are the primary carriers of meaning, why is it that the only consistently demonstrable correlation with worldly achievement involves only a few planets in a specific spatial relationship to the horizon and zenith, entirely independent of the zodiac? This forces a necessary, if uncomfortable, self-examination upon the astrological community. One possible implication is that the Kwakellens have uncovered a kind of bare-bones astrobiology, a fundamental, perhaps even causal, link between planetary positions and human temperament or physiological predisposition upon which the elaborate superstructure of symbolic astrology has been built. In this view, the zodiac and aspects are a later cultural hermeneutic layer that interprets and refines this raw biological signal. Another more challenging implication is that astrologers have been focusing on the wrong variables for centuries, and that the real action is in the diurnal rotation of the Earth, the angles of ascendant and midheaven, rather than in the tropical zodiac. In conclusion, the Kwakellen legacy is one of profound ambiguity. It is neither the triumphant vindication some hope for, nor the irrelevant anomaly others dismiss. It is rather a durable and well-attested scientific puzzle that refuses to go away. Its greatest contribution to astrology is not that it proves horoscopes true, but that it forces a crisis of methodology and theory. It demands that astrologers move beyond anecdote and into a more rigorous engagement with evidence, while simultaneously demonstrating that the scientific establishment is not always the dispassionate arbiter it claims to be. The findings do not provide a ready-made key for practice. One cannot simply look at a chart and see a Kwak-Kellen Mars and pronounce someone an athlete, but they do provide a formidable argument for the existence of a genuine non-random connection between the cosmos and human life. The task for the next generation of astrologers is to build a bridge between the sparse statistical signal and the rich, nuanced, and profoundly human practice of chart interpretation. We must ask not whether Kwak-Kellen vindicates our tradition, but how our tradition can evolve to intellectually accommodate and explain his challenging and inconvenient data. Now we have our final question for section B. Number 3. A synastry chart reveals nothing more than the projection of unconscious needs. Contrast the traditional approach to relationship astrology, composite charts, synastry, with a Jungian psychological interpretation. Which framework do you find more compelling and why? The Music of the Spheres in a New Key, John Addy's harmonic theory and its quest for legitimacy. In the long and often contentious search for a rational foundation for astrology, the work of the late John Addy stands as a particularly elegant and ambitious endeavor. Reacting against both the simplistic fatalism of popular astrology and the vague subjectivism of its psychological school, Addy sought to ground the art in the immutable language of mathematics. His harmonic theory, drawing inspiration from Pythagoras, Kepler, and the ancient concept of the music of the spheres, proposes that astrological meaning is not primarily derived from planets, signs, or houses, but from the underlying numerical resonances or harmonics that structure the cosmos. This is a profound theoretical claim, promising to unify disparate astrological phenomena under a single testable principle, yet the critical question remains whether this mathematical framework truly provides the robust foundation astrology needs, or whether it simply constructs a magnificent but ultimately impenetrable castle of abstraction, further divorcing the art from the lived human experience it seeks to illuminate. The core of Addy's theory is both simple in its premise and complex in its application. He posits that the 360-degree circle of the zodiac is not merely a measuring tape, but a fundamental field of vibration. Any aspect between planets, a conjunction, 0 degrees, opposition, 180 degrees, or a square, 90 degrees, can be understood as a manifestation of a specific harmonic. The opposition, for instance, is a division of the circle by 2 and thus belongs to the second harmonic. The square is a division by 4, belonging to the fourth harmonic. Addy's revolutionary step was to extend this principle to all whole number divisions of the circle, not just the familiar Ptolemaic aspects. The fifth harmonic, divisions of 72 degrees, the seventh harmonic, approximately 51.4 degrees, the ninth harmonic, 40 degrees, each represents a distinct qualitative principle or note in the cosmic symphony. The theoretical claim here is monumental. Addy argues that the traditional astrological alphabet, the meanings of planets, signs, and houses are themselves emergent properties of these more fundamental harmonics. A planet in this view is not an actor with a fixed character, but a broadcaster of a range of harmonic frequencies. A sign is a filter that emphasizes certain harmonics over others. The fourth harmonic, for example, associated with the square and the number 4, is linked to themes of structure, order, limitation, and material reality, the very domain traditionally ruled by Saturn. Thus, Saturn becomes not a capricious god, but the planetary symbol most strongly associated with the principle of the fourth harmonic. This provides a potential unifying theory, explaining why, for instance, a square aspect, fourth harmonic, often manifests in a Saturnine manner. The promise of this framework for providing a more robust and testable astrology is significant. Firstly, it is inherently quantifiable. The presence and strength of any harmonic in a chart can be calculated with mathematical precision, offering a clear variable for statistical research, far clearer than the often subjective interpretation of a whole chart. This moves beyond the Kwak-Kellen's descriptive correlations towards a predictive, model-based science. Secondly, it offers an elegant explanation for the problem of orbs, suggesting that the influence of a harmonic is strongest at its exact angle but radiates with diminishing strength, much like a musical tone has a fundamental pitch with surrounding harmonics. Thirdly, it systematizes a vast range of astrological phenomena, from the major aspects to the minutiae of minor aspects, under a single logical principle. However, the critical challenge to harmonic theory is whether this very systematization comes at too high a cost. Does it add a layer of complex abstraction that ultimately obscures rather than clarifies the astrological encounter? The first problem is one of interpretation. While the fourth harmonic may be Saturnine, what precisely is the core meaning of the seventh or the 13th? Addy and his followers have proposed interpretations, but these often feel derived from traditional symbolism and then retrofitted to the number rather than emerging self-evidently from the mathematics itself. The system risks becoming a self-referential code, where the astrologer must learn an entirely new and highly abstract language of numerical principles, a language that may be intellectually stimulating but lacks the immediate mythic resonance of Mars, Venus, or the sign of Leo. Furthermore, the theory's drive towards a grand unification can be seen as reductive. The rich, paradoxical, and deeply human symbolism of a planetary placement, a Neptune in Scorpio, for instance, with all its nuances of mystical passion, psychological depth, and potential for illusion, might be broken down into a set of harmonic coefficients. In attempting to explain everything through mathematics, there is a danger of explaining away the very soul of astrology. The lived reality of a client's suffering or joy can become lost in a spreadsheet of harmonic weights. The chart becomes a complex waveform to be analyzed, rather than a story to be told or a psyche to be understood. In this sense, harmonic astrology can be accused of committing the same sin as the mechanistic science it sought to transcend. It prioritizes the quantifiable over the qualitative. In conclusion, John Addy's harmonic theory represents one of the most sophisticated and intellectually coherent attempts to place astrology on a rational footing in the modern era. Its theoretical claims are powerful, offering a testable unifying hypothesis that has the potential to systematize research and silence critics who dismiss astrology as a random collection of symbols. It provides a framework that is, in principle, more robust than any that has preceded it. Yes, its satisfaction is ultimately ambiguous. For those seeking a scientific validation of astrology, harmonics may provide the most promising path forward, but for the practicing astrologer engaged in the hermeneutic act of interpretation, it can feel like a departure from the art's core mission. The theory does not so much solve the problems of traditional astrology as it does transpose them into a new and highly complex key. It offers the rigor of mathematics, but risks losing the poetry of the stars. Perhaps the most fruitful path is not to see harmonic analysis as a replacement for traditional methods, but as a complementary depth technique, a way of tuning one's ear to the underlying mathematical frequencies that structure the cosmic symphony, while never forgetting that the purpose of the music is to be felt, understood, and lived.